Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego. And if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That is right, y'all, my favorite author, and this is a very special 219th edition of this program. Can y'all believe it? It is literally crazoid, my friends. And yes, for everybody who has been along on this journey with me for the 3+ years, badass of you, say thank you. You've been supremely awesome. And yeah, if you're just stumbling upon this video, it was actually Dark Tower coverage that kind of got this show started like all those years ago back in 2017 when we were approaching that awful film. And yeah, I just got super stoked and reread all 8 of the books. It was the second time reading all of those, in most of the cases. And so, yes, I had to do something tower related, obviously, for this special episode, being the number 19 and all, although I did float some other ideas for the sheer fact that 19 is even beyond the Dark Tower in a lot of ways. It pops up in so many of his works, and yeah, there's good reason for that. King actually has a terrific essay called The Importance of Being 19, if I recall correctly. That's the title, but yeah, it's at the beginning of the re-release of The Gunslinger that they did, where he expanded on some things and whatnot, yada yada yada. But yeah, it's a very insightful little piece on him, well, just on the importance of it, obviously, and the essay details about how, when you turn 19, it's kind of stepping into adulthood and how, important and formative of a year it is. And so, yeah, insightful stuff there, and plus the number pops up all over the place. It's Blockade Billy's number, for God's sake, in one of the things that I read recently for another review. So, yes, I'm going to be counting down my 19 favorite moments in the Dark Tower. Now, this is where I have to forewarn everybody, okay? Art is subjective. There are a lot of apologists for the last 3 books in the Dark Tower. Not going to see as much from those last 3 books of the Dark Tower because I am nowhere near as big on those as a lot of people. However, there is a couple instances and stuff. So before you just rake me over the coals in the comments, please take into consideration that there are other opinions than these, okay, everybody? So let's just breathe and air, okay? In, out. Okay, bits of the old in-out. So yeah, I'm notorious for I guess honorable mentions, so some honorable mentions would most definitely be the Battle of Tull. Another honorable mention, we'll just do another one from the last book in the series, the stuff with Dandelo. Those are not on this list, but they narrowly missed out, and so yes, this is in no particular order, everybody, okay? So let's just start cruising on through, and really for me, one of the first big things in the Gunslinger book was when we flashed back and we had stuff with Roland as a kid and learning a little bit about just, the fact that he was from this important line of Eld and all that. But when, Martin kind of deceives him and he has to go and declare his manhood and take on court. That is my first in this list of 19. So at number 19, we have, trying to take down Court. And him being a very wily youngster that he was, he decides to take as his weapon David, his hawk. And he's able to take down his, grizzled trainer. And it's a very iconic scene. It's done awesomely in that Jai Lee Robin Firth comic that came out a number of years ago. I cannot stress how badass those Dark Tower comics are, because they do essentially what Glenn Mazzara was trying to with that television series that was abandoned on Amazon, and that's tell the young Roland story. I can't remember if they actually had plans for that scene, because all that I heard was the shootout in the tap room was there, and boy did that break my heart when I listened to that podcast and heard everything that Glenn had planned and stuff. But I was actually totally okay with, as opposed to starting in the middle of the story and then jumping back doing stuff chronologically. I thought that kind of made sense, and that's what they did with the comic books. So check out those Marvel comics. But yeah, my first in this list of 19 is Roland besting Court and winning his guns, man. So next up we have dropping Jake to death in the cave with the slow mutants. So this is a very crucial scene because it has that all too important phrase, there are other worlds than these, and that's where we really start to... King expanded significantly when he revised the original book, and that's where he took out some of the references to, basically where they were in All World being our world, as opposed to one that was in a separate dimension. And so, yes, this was where King first just gave you that hint that this is an interdimensional thing. This is far bigger than just this, post-apocalyptic meets medieval landscape that we're going through in this particular book. And this says so much about Roland's character. We got a hint about it, during the Battle of Tull, where he was willing to sacrifice Barwench, and just let her, kill her. He's just like, whatever, you're not getting in my way. And he doubled down on that with just, seeing the man in black and being enticed. And it's like, dude, will you chase me and chase your tower, or will you save this kid? You got to make some choices, man. And this really set the stage for the arc that we would have with Roland as he opens up his heart, as he gathers his new Ka-Tet, so just stone cold, so heartbroken, so determined because of all he had already lost in the process. So just dropping Jake as our second in this list of 19 instances, it was such a big indicator of character, but also the better man that he could become. So, next up at my number 3, peeps, we have Palaver with the Dark Man. And this is one of the most, it's possibly the most psychedelic sequence in the entire Dark Tower franchise. Just the discussion of the nature of the universe and the insane just dream and explanation and all of this stuff. Like it reminded me of when I've consumed crazy moosh, mushies and stuff like that, and just realizing that you are a mere speck in the spectrum. And it also, this is where there's other worlds than these. Yeah, it's way beyond that, man. So it's a scene that I have long thought would be really dope to make into a short film, and I've talked with Cecil about this. We just don't... It would be so tough to impart. You would have to go into like full-on animated sequence, and that would be incredibly expensive. And I mean, you could condense it to some degree and maybe just have like words and phrases popping up, or I don't know. There's been various thoughts about this, but it would make such a dope-ass just animated segue or something, and it's one of my favorite bits in that original book. And yes, the original book has a massive amount of memorable moments, but we are going to be stepping away from the original book now, everybody, and jumping into the Drawing of the Three. Now, yeah, Drawing of the Three has a lot of fans. I appreciate it, but I don't absolutely love it like a lot of people. So there's only going to be a couple instances here as we move right along. So yes, we are at number 4. And number 4 is the Lobstrosity Attack. So at the very beginning, Roland, he wakes up on the Western Sea. He realizes, okay, yeah, I see what I need to do. I see where I'm going. He's kind of trying to clear his head, especially after, contemplating even more so the fact that, the man in black is dead. He's got his jawbone, all this different stuff. And, he's like, is he actually dead? Was I possibly deceived? So on and so forth. And then he is seemingly attacked by that... Yeah, it's a fun sequence, but it's a freaky-ass sequence, too, because these things are actually relatively large. Loses his fingers in the process. He has to alter his gun slinging tactics. That is for damn sure. And so that is a scene that most definitely everybody remembers distinctively, myself included. The reason I have issues with the Drawing of the Three in a lot of ways is because I'm not as big in the stuff that happens in, New York City. I'm not as big on, getting... Odetta/Detta's backstory, who would later become Susanna. I'm not as big into, when he jumps into Jack Mort's body and, saves Jake and all that other stuff. So, the bit that I definitely have to go for my next one and the final one from the Drawing of the Three, as we continue along here, is going to be the showdown at Balazar's. The showdown at Balazar's is crazy as balls because of the fact that first you've got Eddie naked there running around and shooting people, and you've got Roland in his body, and we have the horrible death of his brother that had just transpired. And yeah, there's interdimensional doorways that open. We have mobsters chewed up by lobstrosities, you know, actually getting that fulfillment of having somebody actually, you know, completely chowed down on by them. But that scene is supremely iconic, and for me, it's the best scene in the entire book, hands down. I know some people really dig the final bit with having the, you know, just merge the, you know, Odetta into Detta, and that, you know, conflict on the beach at the very end. And some people really like the Eddie Dean backstory. The Eddie backstory, you know, with Eddie being the equivalent of Bert, that's what I like the most, probably, but Eddie is for sure the most flawed of our Ka-Tet, you know, our new Ka-Tet that includes Susanna and Oi and Jake. And so, yeah, man, it's significant stuff, but it's even above the lobstrosity attack for me. It is, it's my favorite beat in the entirety of Drawing of the Three. So now we move on to the book that is neck and neck for my personal favorite here in the entire Dark Tower, and that is The Wastelands #3. Yeah, spoilers, obviously, as I continue on through all of this stuff, but, you know, there's some dope honorables, like fighting with Shardik and whatnot. That's a fun thing, but really, the book starts to seriously pick up when Jake, having dealt with, you know, these just feuding just bits in his head, you know, the tornness, and Roland's experiencing the same thing because an alternate timeline has been started with the saving of Jake and not letting Jack Mort, you know, when Roland was in his body, actually push him in front of the car. So we've got these two warring factions within Jake's head, and so that's when he runs over to that, the Dutch Hill Mansion, I think it's called, and that's where he has that encounter with the creature, and we in turn have Eddie and Susanna and Roland assist in pulling him through. This was a bit that in that Dark Tower movie, they actually did decently. I will give them at least some credit. That was one of the few bits, man, where I was just like, okay, I will give you that. That was actually, you know, kind of cool, the crazy door-looking monster and stuff. It's illustrated splendidly in the book, though, so definitely take that into consideration, too. But yeah, let's continue trudging through the Wastelands, everybody. So we're actually going to skip a decent amount because the book does slow down, at least until we approach Lud and we hear those, you know, those ZZ Top drums and stuff. And yeah, man, when Jake is kidnapped by Gasher, once they're in Lud, and taken below the city and the crazy maze that is there, it is most definitely one of my favorite and most captivating sequences in the entire book. I mean, yes, there's the crazy massacre that's going on between the two warring factions, you know, up above and stuff, but really where, you know, you have to get Jake somehow, man. He's not gonna allow him to be sacrificed again, so to speak. And yes, it's almost like this is the beginning of the redemptive arc of sorts, and how he slowly starts to become, you know, Roland's spiritual, you know, father of sorts, because, you know, Elmer, he didn't have the best relationship with him anyway. And then we come to my final bit, and this is going to be another controversial omission. Blame the Pain. Not as into it, man. I never was. It's interesting, you know, and the way that Eddie actually, you know, goes on to defeat him with nonsense and everything, even though Jake's got the Ritalin book and all that stuff. But yeah, my last choice here in my 19 favorite moments is none other than the TikTok man's revelation with the arrival of a particular person that happens at the very end of the book. And my life for you, when you have Flag, the walking dude, the man in black, a man of many guises, obviously. Yeah, when he showed up at the end of this book, I still remember, like, losing my shit, because the stand was the reason that I decided to jump into this bigger King multiverse in the first place, because I was like, damn, like, Flag shows back up, and then when I realized he's also in the, you know, Eyes of the Dragon, and he makes various other appearances under different guises. I mean, hell, he's even in there as Richard Ferris in flipping Gwendy's button box. So yeah, the TikTok man revelation and the arrival of Flag, and just hearing that line that was delivered so iconically by the trash can man at the very end of The Wastelands, man, there are few better moments, at least for me, as we continue on. So now we go into my absolute favorite book in the Dark Tower franchise, and that is none other than Wizard and Glass. And Wizard and Glass is so dope because y'all know that it's broken up into the 2 different timelines. So we have, escaping Blaine the Pain and, just going through this different dimension. And then we also have the flashback to all the stuff with the young original Ka-Tet, going to Hambry and everything, and a certain romance and whatnot. But seriously, when they get off in Topeka, Texas, and there's the stuff about Captain Trips and everything, and you realize, man, the stand and everything, it's very prevalent here, although it's not Keystone, that's for sure, because you see Nozzle Cola and you see, different sports teams and car brands and all this other stuff. But so just the double down of the tie-in with Captain Trips and the stand, but also the other dimension stuff and the fact that Captain Trips could still be released in other worlds and things of that nature. Worlds very similar to our own, and who knows what damage it could have done in those very different. But that arrival in Topeka, man, peeps, it is most definitely a very dope experience, and one that for me, being such a big fan of the stand, was supremely satisfying. I cannot stress enough how rad status I thought that was. So next up, we have jumping back in time to Hambry, and yes, the wonderful romance and everything. It's really, for me, as far as pivotal stuff goes and going to our next selection here, it's got to be Charyu Tree, the Charyu Tree sacrifice. And it's really the end game of what this forbidden love between Susan Delgado and Roland actually brings about. It's heartbreaking. It is just so terrible what, Rhea does to her, and, bringing the entire town against her, especially after, DePape kills the mayor, and, who he was... he was supposed to be, getting those juicy vittles from Susan, and she wasn't about that, obviously. She wanted someone her own age, but just the fact that it's the first person to really be sacrificed significantly as Roland, pursues his tower and just it starts his mission, and, he sees it all happen in the grapefruit, and it's just... it is as crushing as anything. If you are a true tower junkie, as Eddie Dean put it at one particular point, yeah, I can't see anybody leaving Charyu Tree off the list. Just those 2 words, and it just sends a chill down my spine, y'all. So, and then the next and final bit that we have from this particular Dark Tower book in my 19 favorite moments is the massacre at Eyeball Canyon. This is where, all of those forces from that, Farson has, and they are basically tricked by our young Ka-Tet into running into that Eyeball Canyon where there is a thinny. And this is a thinny that actually takes you not to New York City or anything of that nature. Nah, man, we are talking as Lovecraft of alternate dimension that particular one takes you to, as some of the most ferocious, awful, we're talking... Man, yeah, we're talking Crouch End kind of stuff here, man. It's nutsoid, and it's just such a cool tactic by the boys, outsmarting all of them and basically, pushing them into this area, and just much, I mean, it's a maturing process, right? It's basically the fact that they were able to outwit, this is them becoming men in a lot of ways, which is what this entire journey for, Elaine and Bert and, Roland obviously entailed, and it's why I'm still so incredibly sad that we didn't get to see this done for the Amazon series. I will be crying about that in my Cheerios for some time to come. Now, this is a bit where I want to at least make a brief segue into Roland's other love. Yes, Roland did have another love, nothing on the level of Susan, but it's in a story called The Little Sisters of Euluria. It shows up in Everything's Eventual. I have long mentioned here that, yeah, I absolutely adore Everything's Eventual's, short, The Sisters of Euluria. It was also made into a badass Marvel comic book. And this is where basically Roland is going through this spot that looks very similar to the area that, excuse me, very similar to the area that the pavilion that Jack Sawyer walks through in the Talisman, but it's very much abandoned at this particular point. He's attacked by slow mutants. He is rescued, but the rescuers are actually vampire nurses, and he is only saved because he's got, you know, a golden cross on. And yes, with the aid of this Sister Jenna, he's able to escape. And it's really the only woman that he has feelings for pretty much, you know, the rest of this series, with the exception of Susan before. And the moment specifically that I am referring to here on this moment of 19 is where at the end of the story he awakens and he does realize that, yeah, there was no way that their love could work because, you know, her being what she was and everything, despite her, you know, her affinity, her feelings, her conviction, all this different stuff, he just looks and, you know, her clothes, there's no more body there. It's just a bunch of bugs crawling around and stuff. And it's a very just sad moment that Roland isn't supposed to have love. It's just not in the cards, man. So yeah, it's definitely not one that he is meant to draw. He has a bigger mission on his hands, and yet I dig the hell out of that story, as I've mentioned here on this program countless times, and I've always found that moment incredibly heartbreaking. And he does actually reference it in just one line in the book that we're about to jump into here shortly, Wolves of the Calla. He does mention that there was another, you know, when the topic of Susan comes up. But now we jump into none other than a couple little references, and that's from the 4.5 book that it was released after all of the other books, and so maybe, you know, now that I think about it, I will actually just continue along in the published order and stuff here. So let's just jump into 5 then, because 5 only has a couple beats specifically. This is where the series started to lose its way for me. It became a little convoluted in all of the stuff with, you know, trying to set up the tech corporation and finding more about North Central and all that other stuff. I've never been as about that aspect of the tower as I am just, I've always loved more, you know, just the straight up medieval dystopian fantasy elements, as opposed to where, you know, they started bringing so much world jumping back into New York. And in any event, I mean, there's a lot of interesting ideas and very cool stuff in the Wolves of the Calla, but for me, when they're first getting to Calabrunch Sturgis and they are basically finding out the whole Last Samurai thing that they need to do, you know, with the wolves coming and, you know, the root children and all that different stuff, for me, when they are first being, like, just presented to everybody and then they have their big, you know, just feast and celebration because help has arrived, and when Roland jumps up and just starts dancing the Kamala and everything, it is just such a joyful instance, and it shows how much progress the guy has made. The fact that these people that he has surrounded him with, this new Ka-Tet, they are bringing him, they're opening up his heart, you know, to actually being joyful, which presumably that dude has not experienced in who knows how long, with how many cycles around he's been and everything. And so, yes, it's just, it's brilliantly painted by Bernie Wrightson in the Wolves of the Calla book, and it's one of the sweetest moments. We don't get as many sweet moments in the Dark Tower, unfortunately. You know, maybe some of those tender moments between Eddie and Susanna, and obviously, you know, when Roland and, you know, Delgado were first bedding down or whatever, and it's all sweet and, you know, young love and whatnot. But there's not really a lot of moments that just make you smile like this one, and so that's why it absolutely has to be there here as we go through my 19 favorite moments. And as I've said, these aren't in a particular order per se. That's why we're jumping through, you know, the publication. But now we get to the only other one that really resounds with me. I know some peeps are going to be like, hey, there's no, you know, mention of the flashbacks to Jericho Hill and the dreams. Well, they're flashbacks in a dream. King has promised for so long he's going to give us a proper Battle of Jericho Hill. We got it in the comic books, but that was just some of his notes given to Robin, you know, and then in turn given the, you know, Peter David, I believe, is the guy from Marvel who assisted with the writing process. And so, I mean, hey, it is what it is. We've seen it in that form, but we haven't got it from the word slinger himself, Cy King. And so, yeah, just, it's not here. The one that I am thinking of is Father Callahan's backstory. Father Callahan's backstory was actually originally supposed to be a book in and of itself, a true sequel to Salem's Lot, but you know, he ended up just deciding to condense it a little bit, fold it in here, and just I know it's kind of a cop-out to say, yeah, the backstory of Father Callahan, because it's like 100-something pages, but it's just very captivating to see, you know, him going across the country, very similar to Brodigan in a lot of ways, as we find out in 7, but ending up, you know, working at that home for, you know, the homeless and everything, and then, you know, the man that Father Callahan ends up having feelings for, and then, you know, the re-encounters with the vampires and all of that. It's just, it's honestly my favorite stuff in Wolves of the Calla, and I know some people will find that particularly blasphemous, especially, you know, many in the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. Sorry, everybody, but nonetheless, it's just, it's my favorite stuff in here, and everything else, just, you know, with the jumping back and forth, and, you know, just more with the Field of the Rose, and, you know, more with Calvin Tower, and trying to figure all that stuff out, and, you know, Balazar's goons showing back up and fighting over the property, and them being involved with there's something just so nice and simplistic about just finding out what happened to Father Callahan after, you know, he left Jerusalem's lot, and so after, you know, he was just marked by Barlow. So yeah, the Father Callahan backstory, that is most definitely the bit that I wanted to mention here. So next up we have the one and only moment. Yep, from the 6th book, my least favorite book. Yes, Beamquakes. I thought about putting Beamquakes in there, and yes, I thought a little bit about, you know, Mia and Susanna having their palaver back at Castle Discordia, because it's kind of interesting, but I've just never liked that subplot very much, you know, about the, you know, the double demon, you know, spider baby growing in her and all that, you know, the additional personality from, you know, Roland getting down and banging the Oracle. I've just, I don't know, I've never liked that subplot particularly much. So those are at least a few beats that, you know, were in the running, so to speak. And, you know, another one in the running probably would have been them talking to Cy King, you know, when Eddie and Roland actually jump back to that particular main, and there's, you know, all of the, you know, people, you know, crossing over or whatever, the interlopers or whatever the hell they call them. I forget the name off the top of my head, you know, and them hypnotizing Cy King, and then maybe some would even contend for Cy King, you know, recanting getting run over in the book, which this 6 is where it got way too meta for me. But hey, there are other opinions than these, so if you were really into it, I commend you, and I'm glad that you found more fulfillment in that particular decision by Cy King than I particularly did. But yes, those, I thought about putting them in here, but since I had to limit it to 19, and since my favorite beats happened in those first 4 books, I concede to everything except the Dixie Pig, and the incident of the Dixie Pig definitely crosses over between both of the books, but between 6 and 7, but yeah, Father Callahan and Jake actually getting to this nasty, seedy club that has, you know, it's got Tyene, it's got Cantoya, it's got vampires, and, you know, they're gonna eat a person, and just all this stuff. God, I'm trying to remember if it was a baby. I think it was. But yeah, so obviously this, you know, it begins like their arrival is at the end of 6, and then it, you know, it leads into the beginning of 7. 6 just felt so much like a preamble of sorts. Like, I honestly think that he could have brought some of the stuff from 7, put it into 6, and just made 2 more balanced books, because 7 is so bloated, and there's just, I don't know. But that Dixie Pig confrontation, and especially with Father Callahan sacrificing himself, because he obviously, you know, made some mistakes, you know, in his past too, and so I'm much like Roland, there is a redemptive arc for him as well, you know, and he's like, you know, as he says in, I believe, 5, he's like, well, go on, Gunslinger, you know, chase your tower, and so on and so forth. But yeah, Father Callahan's sacrifice here, and just this encounter, and, you know, obviously we know they're trying to get the chap out of Susanna at this particular point too. They're trying to get Mordred out. So yeah, just that entire sequence, and, you know, Susanna escaping, you know, just everything at the Dixie Pig, so much that transpires there is big time stuff, and sets a lot into play for our final 7th book. So there's two moments in particular in the 7th book that I wanted to mention, because I'm not as big into the 7th book. I do like it more than 6, but still, so it's not the big, crazy fight with, trying to free all the breakers and stuff, but I thought about it. It's not when, they're actually getting into Endworld and we know that our Ka-Tet has been thinned at that particular point. So yeah, the two moments that really stick out to me the very most, there's a lot of death of members of this Ka-Tet that transpire. We lose Eddie, obviously, we lose Jake, and but the death that really just, it's probably because of the fact that when animals die in movies and, books and stuff like that, there's just something so much sadder for whatever reason, and I know a lot of people feel this way. The loss of human life in that regard is just kind of crazoid, but yeah, guys, it's the death of Oi. It's where he basically, there's the confrontation with Mordred, and just King through Mordred did my dude flag so dastardly dirty, it just pissed the hell out of me, everybody. But yes, so it's Oi, his sacrifice, and then him just being stuck on, it's just very rough to think about, and he's the last one besides Susan at that particular point, and Susan, as we know, goes along with him and stuff. But yeah, just that sacrifice, I hate to say it, more so than with Jake getting run over again, God, and the irony of that, obviously. But Oi and his demise, just for whatever reason, hit me so incredibly hard. It really, really did. And then we come to our that 19th, well, basically I've got our 2 from 4.5, and Roland approaching the tower at the very end of the 7th book. Finally getting there. I hated the stuff with how they handled the Crimson King, but when we get past the fake out ending with, Jake and Eddie Torrin in a different New York, obviously, because that's where, Susanna's ended up. But it's where we get the real ending, and I still remember getting chills and goosebumps and everything as he is calling out the names of all of his people that have died along the way with him, from both Ka-Tets, and, his training, he calls out both, Court and, boy, just... Yeah, it's intense, man. And yet then we find out the true nature of everything, and we come back to that final line that started out the entire series in the first place. Then we realize the cyclical nature of all of this, and yet he does have something specific, in that horn of Eld that basically makes you think, okay, maybe this could be the last time around. And I know that's how they marketed that film, as the last time around, yay, blah, blah, blah. But I still think that that's what redeemed the 7th book for me, was that finally transpiring, as opposed to all of the other stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is cool, I guess, and hey, it is what it is, everybody. If you really love the hell out of that 7th and final book, and I've seen some people put book 7 as their number 1, to each their own. It is the culmination of decades of writing and, plotting and all that other stuff, which King says he didn't plot, but then again, he says that he did have notes that he was going to, give for the 5, 6, and 7 book to Joe at one time. But it is what it is, man. So, and then we do have our 2 other bits that I have to mention, and they're from 4.5. From 4.5, they are none other than the first just encounter with the destruction of the Skinwalker. Now, 4.5 is the story within the story within the story. They've got that Stark Blast that's coming through. They have to bed down for a little bit after escaping the Emerald Castle and everything, and seeing Flag once more. And so they're hiding out. And Roland is telling another story of when him and Jaime DeCurry went to where, this city by where his mother, went off to be in like kind of a monastery type thing almost of sorts. But yeah, so just the destruction of that shapeshifter, and there's just in that barn pieces everywhere of people. It's one of those horror moments in the Dark Tower series, that is for damn sure. And so I definitely just, the confrontation where they finally meet the Skinwalker, yeah, that might be something. But I love where King goes horror in the Dark Tower series, and he only does it a few times, but this is definitely one of the beats where he most definitely does, everybody. And the 19th and final one, I probably should have just saved the Ascension of the Tower for the final one, since timeline-wise this takes place in between. But the fact that King wrote it after, it's the very last bit of the Wind Through the Keyhole, and it's where basically Roland reads the note from his mother, who we all know he kills accidentally, obviously, but still he's responsible for the death of his mother, and it's, very, very heartbreaking what happens with Gabrielle and with how Martin, just glamored her and all of that stuff. It's really, really terrible, but the fact that she kind of foresaw it and she forgave him, and the essence of the Wind Through the Keyhole that I love so much, just whether it's Tim's story or whether it's jumping back into the Roland story, is it's the love between a mother and her son and the importance of it, and just whether you're trying to save your mother or whether you're trying to make amends about mistreating your mother. It's terrific stuff, everybody. So that is my 19 favorite moments from the Dark Tower series. Say thank you, everybody who has supported this show. Another thing that I wanted to show all of you is I've been sitting on this for a hot minute, but let's get something to cut this with. There we go. That'll probably work. Okay. So I have been waiting on this from Grant Publishing, for quite a while, and kind of decided to finally spoil myself and obtain it, because we have none other than, here you go, Boxy. Speaking of the Wind Through the Keyhole, finally did it, finally broke down and got this amazing edition that is actually illustrated by none other than Jaime, who we all know did the Dark Tower comic books, or at least did them for a good chunk of time. They eventually brought on other artists, but yeah, let's check this bad boy out. Yeah, so we've got Tim with the tiger there, obviously. This is one that for Mike's book reviews, I've been kind of telling him he needs to read, because he's a big Tower junkie like me. Oh, it's signed by Jai Lee too. That is dope. You can actually see it, the light and everything. But yeah, tons of awesome original illustrations in this. Not gonna bore you too long here, but we have a cool foreword by Cy King, and yeah, so it starts with Stark Blast. You see we've got Oi there. What else? Yeah, there's a ton of stuff in this. I cannot wait to look over everything proper. Yeah, and then part 1 with the Skin Man when we get some more young Roland jazz. So yeah, this is most definitely a beautiful, beautiful edition. Yeah, we've even got some colored bits too. So yes, I am. Boy, I gotta handle this with care. I am so just, yeah, incredibly, fine-tooth comb with these particular editions. I almost don't even end up reading them a lot of the time. I just look at the beautiful artwork and then I hide it on my shelf, and I know some people might be like, that defeats the purpose, dude. Well, I mean, these things cost money. I think this edition was only like maybe $70, and I had ordered it a little while back, but yeah, I finally have this now, just seeking out more of those original Grant hardcovers. Those talk about a pretty penny though. So just wanted to show all of you that on this special 219th episode. Gracias, everybody. I have been Jaime Fuego, and you can find Wa on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. Greatly appreciate you taking the time to check out this video. Definitely check out the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, where we have all kinds of palaver with like 800 something peeps. It has grown significantly since it was started, a year or two ago. And yes, I appreciate the kef that we all share in that Ka-Tet so very much. As I said, we're going to be returning with the tier ranking soon, the third one in the novel tier ranking that Cecil and I did, and also a reminder that the book of the month here in June is none other than Rose Madder, and we're going to be doing a live on July 4th. Yes, I know, if you're here in the States, you might be busy. Hey, take a brief break from your barbecuing for an hour or so to talk about that book if you feel inclined. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the proceedings, as I said, y'all. So once again, gracias, danke, arigato, merci, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, constant readers, and yes, all of these travelers along the path of the beam say thank you. I can't enough, obviously, for all the support over the years. And yes, I guess until next time, remember, stay scared and read Stephen King. Read it. Read The Wind Through the Keyhole.